Support for this program is provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and from viewers like you.
Hello and welcome to Louisiana Public Square. I'm Beth Courtney, president of LPB.
And I'm Robert Travis Scott, president of the Public Affairs Research Council of Louisiana. Have you ever considered how much we benefit from the research and development happening at higher education institutions here in Louisiana? University R&D has produced the domestic and hardy Jazzman rice, innovative methods to process big data, breakthroughs in cybersecurity, and a revolutionary air conditioning system, just to name a few.
Well, moving university innovation to the marketplace is called technology transfer. And should that be one of the goals of college research? If so, what's the best way to make that happen? Over the next hour, we'll hear the opinions of university researchers, economic development leaders, and members of the business community. We'll also learn about the state of R&D on Louisiana college campuses, and we'll examine whether these efforts may be in jeopardy because of budgetary pressures. All this and more as we explore Innovation Matters. Dr. Mandy Lopez knows that one new discovery can take a long time to get to market.
So I've been working on this device for about 12 years. It is licensed by Tessa Medical, and it is patented by LSU.
Lopez is a researcher at LSU's vet school. She says she noticed the problems doctors have when performing ACL reconstructive surgery on knees. So she came up with the Graft Grab, a device that maintains the tension in the ligament after surgery.
Based on my experience developing and working with medical devices, I proposed a new approach, and that is to develop a device that did not require any extra instruments to use.
Lopez says that as a scientist at a university, it's in her nature to observe and solve problems. Her process stems from observing a problem herself, but other professors say industry brings its problems to their labs. Dr. Terry Chambers studies solar thermal power at the Clico Alternative Energy Center at UL Lafayette.
With regard to this particular center, we were approached by Clico Power LLC probably 4 years ago, and they said, we have decided that it's very important for us to investigate renewable energy. Also, after that initial investment, then there's all these other companies who have come in and made additional investments as well.
A recent report by the Public Affairs Research Council, or PAR, touted UL Lafayette as a model for what R&D could look like at a higher ed institution. Research there thrives on relationships with business and industry. You can see that in their funding model. A large part of their research, 19%, is funded by the private sector. The national average is 5%. Camille Conaway with the Louisiana Association of Business and Industry wrote the report.
States that have a strong innovation economy and a strong higher education and industrial partnership, those are states that are creating knowledge-based jobs. Those are states that are prioritizing 21st century jobs. Basic research is really important and clearly fundamental and a primary function of universities. Applied research and getting that research into market is a stated goal of most publicly funded research. The whole purpose is to benefit the public at large and not to have that research sit in a lab.
Chambers says economic development seeps into every part of his mission as a researcher. Not only is the center training students to be engineers, but he hopes his research will aid in cultivating a new industry in Louisiana.
Louisiana is known throughout the world as being the place to come if you want to do offshore oil work, right? So we have a ton of companies here in Louisiana with a lot of expertise in the oil and gas industry. They have all the skills that they need if we can teach them how to transfer those skills that they already have from the oil and gas industry into the renewable and sustainable power and fuel industry.
Dr. Ramesh Kolaru, the Vice President of Research at UL Lafayette, says he tries to instill that attitude at every level of the university.
Our core value at UL Lafayette is that we are committed to research for a reason. So while we have a lot of basic researchers that do a lot of fundamental science and research, we pride in our ability to work with business and industry and translate what it is that we do into solutions that help those companies generate new products or offer new services.
Not all higher ed research leaders agree with what's stated in the report about commercializing R&D. LSU President Dr. King Alexander says he doesn't think the report sees the whole picture.
Tech transfer is a byproduct of the much larger picture of R&D. It's something that can come from R&D and as it filters through the research and development. But R&D is much bigger and broader than tech transfer. It's about making society safer. It's about making our coastal wetlands more resilient. It's about training for homeland security.
The report looks at schools based on the number of disclosures, patents, and licenses produced per $1 million put into R&D. It's a metric used by many organizations to compare schools across the nation. Kolaru would rather measure the number of companies and jobs created.
For us, a true measure of a contribution of a university to economic development is the kinds of activities that all of our universities were involved in the past 2 years, working with LED in helping recruit companies to come and establish operations in Louisiana and add the number of jobs directly and indirectly to the local economy. There's no better indicator of invention and innovation than that.
Dr. K.T. Valsaraj is the Vice Chancellor of the Office of Research and Economic Development at LSU. Valsaraj says a university's contributions may be even more intangible than that.
Research doesn't always end up in something very productive. I give the example of Einstein. If Einstein were here today, would you call him a very innovative leader? No, much of his ideas at that time were so revolutionary, nobody picked it up, right? Tech transfer is not the end all for a university. University has a lot more purpose than just transferring the technology. Knowledge transfer is what we really do.
Things are changing across the state. In the time after Conaway gathered data for the report, disclosure numbers at LSU grew. They have more than tripled at the LSU Health Sciences Center in New Orleans. Conaway says new leadership is fostering a promising direction for R&D. But all that could be at risk without proper funding from the state. Leaders at every institution say faculty are leaving, and it's hard to attract the excellent researchers needed to drive innovation. Conaway says there's a constitutionally protected fund for research. It's called the Support Fund, and its allocation could be refocused to be more effective. She says there are other low-cost measures state leaders could take to improve research.
Co-locate higher education and economic development. When you have leaders, even on the administrative side, working physically across the street from each other, the line at Starbucks would generate ideas because they're all walking back to their offices together. When the new governor makes appointments to regents, this should be part of that conversation to the new Board of Regents appointees. So there are some very small things that a new administration can do, as well as some more important things.
Well, joining us to explore what those important things are is our studio audience. It includes leaders in economic development, higher education, and technology transfer. We also have leadership Louisiana alumni from New Orleans and the town of Scott, plus members of Louisiana's Legislative Youth Advisory Council from Baton Rouge and Mandeville. Well, thanks to everyone for being here. Well, LSU's Public Policy Research Lab created a survey on tonight's topic that Louisiana residents responded to online. Here's a look at some of the findings. When asked how much of an impact research performed by public universities in Louisiana has on their communities, a combined total of 70% of respondents say a significant or noticeable impact, while a total of 27% think the impact is small or very minor. 3% say university research has no impact on their communities. Asked to give their opinion on the impact that state government spending has on university R&D in Louisiana economy, a total of 82% say a very or somewhat positive impact, a total of 7% say a somewhat or very negative impact, and 11% say neither positive nor negative impact. And finally, on the question of whether the mission of universities should be to spur economic development through innovation, the vast majority of respondents, 88%, say yes, and 12% say no. So let's start at that point. How can Louisiana universities do a better job in research and development? What are our strengths and weaknesses? And I'd like to call on Michael Olivier, who's the chief executive of the Committee of 100, a statewide organization. You have both business people and university leaders on your board. How do you see this from your big picture view, Mike?
Well, the Committee of 100 is a business roundtable in Louisiana. And as you said, with over 100 C-level people who are forward-thinking, that includes 10 university presidents that are members. The biggest issue for us is workforce. We've got to have the kinds of people that have the capacity to be able to not only look for the innovation, but also take the technologies and apply them. So for us, it's workforce.
How about that? And we also have somebody here, Mr. Andrew Moss, who you're actually hands-on on the university level at LSU. Your title there is Director of Innovation and Technology Commercialization. Tell us what it's like from your point of view right there in the trenches.
Yeah, so the first mission of our university is to educate students. We're not going to change that. One of the tools we use for education is research at the higher levels of education, at the master's and the PhD level, and pushing down more and more into the undergraduate level is research. And that usually spurs some sort of development, some sort of technology that may come out of it. Getting that technology out into the world is one of the missions of the university, and getting it to be used, whether there's an economic benefit from it or not. We want to get it dispersed and disseminated, just like the knowledge creation that comes from our scholars doing research and writing books.
Andrew, what do you see that the university is doing different to help make that better?
There's several things that we've implemented over the last 12 months. One of them being the LIFT Fund at LSU, which is for leveraging innovation for technology transfer, specifically geared at creating proof of concept devices. Often fundamental research doesn't pay for that leaping of the bridging over. And so this provides small amounts of funding to help create the widget, to get it in front of the business players that are interested in it.
Adam Knapp is here, the chief executive of the Baton Rouge Area Chamber. So Adam, how are we doing and how can we do better?
So one of the things I think you hear around the state today is a lot of excitement about diversifying the economy. And I think really for our organization and for organizations like ours around the state, I think the thing that you get most of the excitement from in communities is that innovation is going to help spur new parts of the economy to grow. And we see this happening nationally as that innovation can drive new sectors and new job creation. As Michael Olivier mentioned a moment ago, that this is a lot of this is about workforce. Another big piece for the regions is how do you continue to drive job creation and job growth? And our sense has been for organizations like ours is that research is really one key way to drive new sectors of growth and new dynamism into an economy. And that's for our region, especially in Baton Rouge, what makes it so exciting is a lot of the leadership you see happening is driving new technology and new innovation now more and more out into the marketplace for those jobs.
Yes, Andrew.
I think if you look at thriving economic metropolitan areas in the United States, almost all of them are centered around a top-tier research institution. And you could make the argument that the research institutions were top tier because of the economy, but I think it's the other way around. The economy is what it is in those locations because of the research institution.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, Gabrielle, you're a journalist?
Yes, with the Baton Rouge Business Report.
Great, great. Now, did you just write a story about all this subject matter?
Yes, we looked at the Business Report, we evaluated what we call, or what is called, the innovation ecosystem here in Baton Rouge, looking at all of the different organizations we have that are all working towards this one effort and how things have been starting to come together. But one thing that we heard from all these different organizations, from BRAC and from LSU and from the Tech Park, was that what's missing is greater coordination between all of them, and it's something that's been coming together over time, and we're just starting to see the results now.
We also have here Byron Clayton, who is the president and CEO of the Research Park Corporation. What is a research park, and how does it fit into all of this?
Well, I think, and I'll pick up on Gabrielle's point, when I first came here, what I noticed is that there are so many great things going on in different areas. We have university, we have BRAC, we have BRAF. There are a lot of great things going on. I think what's needed is connecting the dots. When you look at thriving regions, what you see is an innovation ecosystem that's connected. And so for entrepreneurs, for innovators, every step of the way, they have help and support to accelerate their success. I think that's a way that we can do things better here.
You know, and another part of that whole ecosystem is the LSU Business and Technology Center. And we have Nikki here, who you work there in the student incubator, is that right?
I am. I'm a member of the student incubator at LSU's LBTC. And to pick up on what you're talking about, Byron, it's interesting. As an innovator, a researcher myself at LSU's grad school, at the veterinary school, and as a business owner in Baton Rouge, I've been here for a short 6.5 years, but in that time, I've seen a lot of the organizations, but again, there are some organizations represented here today that I haven't even known about. So it's very, very interesting, and I think to find a synergistic medium to bring everybody together would really benefit the greater Baton Rouge area.
So it would seem. And you know, we have a lot of students who are coming up through the system looking at these different universities, this different ecosystem, and trying to figure out where do I fit in, you know, into all that. Samita Rao, you're at Baton Rouge High, okay, and on the Legislative Youth Advisory Council,
yes, sir.
Is that right? How do you view this picture of universities where they're doing research and development? What kind of concerns do you have about university funding as you're sort of growing up into the university world here fairly shortly?
Right. Well, actually, you know, research and development, surprisingly, has already been a major part of my life. My dad is currently a professor at LSU, and my siblings, you know, have both gone through college and both did things relating to research and development. And that's definitely one thing I'm looking into doing in the future as well. And one thing that I'm considering, well, one deciding factor for me in terms of college is funding. And I think with these higher education cuts that have been happening, it kind of has a ripple effect. I know, at least in my dad's point of view, a lot of times what happens is with these higher education cuts, a lot of the talented faculty is leaving. And they're seeking better opportunities in other universities with more funding. And the same goes for, you know, graduate students or students that are looking to do, you know, PhDs or medical degrees or anything like that. They typically go to schools that allocate more funding towards those particular colleges. And so when we're cutting that, I feel like we're kind of, you know, reducing our chances of getting highly talented individuals.
Right. We often hear about the concerns about university funding affecting faculty, but what you're saying, it's seeping all the way down into student decisions about where they're going to college, which sounds like a serious issue to me. How about you? How are you viewing this whole picture?
Well, I'm going to college next year, going to LSU, but it was a tough decision because even though like, yeah, I made the grades, you're going into college and stuff, you want to make sure that you're a viable candidate for college. It's difficult knowing that you could go to other universities and get better opportunities in terms of scholarships and other things as well.
Robert, you also are hands-on. Tell us a little bit about what you do and how this is playing out for your area.
Yeah, so I'm new to Louisiana. I'm the assistant director for the LSU Innovation and Technology Commercialization Office. I work with Andy. So I basically I'm involved in transferring technology and licensing it to industry.
And how does LSU look to you compared to other places in the country you've seen?
Well, I came from Ohio, and in Ohio they've a lot of what Byron said, they've really made a concerted effort to have this ecosystem develop, and I think Louisiana is building on that. You know, now is they're starting to build on that idea. Yeah, that's how I see it.
Well, that's good. We're getting there. Okay, good. Well, that's all the time we have for this portion of our show. When we return, we'll be joined by a panel of experts to further explore Innovation Matters. Welcome back to Louisiana Public Square. Tonight we're discussing Innovation Matters. Joining us now are our panel of experts. Since 2005, Dr. Richard Cordall has been director of the Office of Intellectual Property and Commercialization at Louisiana Tech in Ruston. He is also co-founder of a statewide organization of Louisiana's academic technology transfer directors. During his prior employment in industry, he took numerous products from R&D into the market. Quentin Messer is Assistant Secretary for Louisiana Economic Development. Mr. Messer manages initiatives and programs related to business intelligence, community competitiveness, small business services, and state economic competitiveness. He is the staff leader for Louisiana Innovation Council and a board member of the Research Park Corporation. Dr. Richard Kubek began his tenure as Dean of the College of Engineering at LSU in 2009 after more than 23 years in academia. He has worked in the engineering departments of Penn State, Purdue, and Wright State universities. Dr. Kubek has served as principal and co-investigator on numerous research grants. And Dr. David Winwood is Chief Business Development Officer at Pennington Biomedical Research Center. Dr. Winwood is the president-elect for the Association of University Technology Managers. He has managed intellectual property and economic development activities at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, North Carolina State, and Ohio State universities. Well, before we go to our audience for their questions, I'd like to ask each of you briefly, from your perspective, how is R&D changing in Louisiana, and how can we improve that? And I'm going to start with you, Dr. Cordall.
I would say getting research grants is becoming much more competitive. It's getting harder, and funding agencies, tend to fund not universities but individuals, and they have to write the most compelling grant proposals. I'm also seeing that the agencies are requiring that there's a transition plan. They like to fund transitional research, and they, in fact, in many of the cases, they are including a requirement that they include a transition plan, how they'll transition this technology or the results of the research into the private sector, so there is a payoff or payback for the research that's being they're funding. For our companies to be competitive, they have to continue to innovate, and a lot of the innovations come from basic research, and most of the basic research is occurring at the universities. And you look at like the iPhone, for instance. There are about 7 or 8 different technologies that are incorporated into that, from the LCD screen to the lithium-ion battery to the GPS device. All those things were not developed by Apple. They were developed at the university or as national labs. And so Apple took advantage of that and incorporated that into their product, but they're all the result of fundamental basic research. And so I think we still need to strive the importance of basic research.
Great. And Mr. Messer with LED, with the Department of Economic Development.
Well, I think that it's changing this program. It's part and parcel. I mean, I'm not sure whether we will be having this conversation 5, 6, 7 years ago. Not that great activity wasn't occurring, but the mere fact that we're talking about it publicly indicates a desire to sort of move the ball forward and realize we have to be on the same team. I think secondly, and I think one of the panelists or one of the audience members mentioned before, we're not just talking about research, we're also talking about knowledge transfer. I think Mike Olivier mentioned the whole notion of winning the global competition for talent. And what we're seeing is we're beginning to aggressively tell the story that, look, there are very bright, capable researchers across the board and great schools and great young people here in Louisiana, and that's critically important. I think last is the fact that, it's great to have Adam Knapp here, but we've got 7 other regional economic development organizations statewide that are really working very closely with industry to ensure that we are coordinated and I think being intentional about that. I think in the past we kind of felt like everyone had their head down, but we're now being very intentional and make sure that we work together.
And we talk a lot about knowledge jobs, and that's, I guess, what you're referring to.
Yes, exactly.
Dr. Cordall, Dr. Kubek, excuse me.
Yeah, so from an engineering perspective, this is one of the most exciting times that I've seen in the research and development activities here and what's happening in the state of Louisiana right now. talk about people. We're hiring some great faculty right now. Even some of the students in the audience talk about the importance of doing innovation and tech transfer. So you're seeing it in the DNA of the people that are coming up through it. You need a place to do that research. If you look, for example, at LSU's College of Engineering, we put it up a $110 million engineering building. So those faculty will have a place to do that research. The third part that we pay attention to is what I call the partnerships. And for me, this is one of the most satisfying and exciting things that is happening in Louisiana right now. The partnerships we have between economic development, higher education, and with our industry. And I can tell you that that's a real motivating factor for our faculty. And then the fourth part, and I think it's the part that we have to kind of put our shoulder behind, honestly, is the processes. I think moving forward with the processes that facilitate R&D tech transfer is an area that, for example, was pointed out in PARS. Some great recommendations, and I think that's a place we need to continue to focus attention.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that plug, too. And I should mention, as part of disclosure, that I am a co-author of that report, so we're clear on that. Dr. Winwood with Pennington.
So, yeah, at Pennington Biomedical Research Center, we focus on lifestyle, the sort of process of healthy living. Diabetes, obesity, nutrition are our main areas of expertise and our focus, those things for which we're best known. What it turns out is that those diseases that are affected by our current way of life, particularly in the Western world, are all interconnected. And so one of the themes that I think we're seeing here is that it's impossible to do research in silos, that collaboration and partnership is really a big part. And this is something that Rich mentioned earlier. The iPhone is not one invention, it's thousands of inventions. And so to do basic research at the molecular level and then sort of translate that into how does this guide us in developing new drugs and treatments, and how do we analyze those new treatments and how do we figure out what effect they have on a community. It's really a multidisciplinary effort. So what we see at Pennington is activities certainly from molecular level scientists, people looking at how this new drug or new treatment might work, all the way through how it has an impact on a population. So looking at the diseases of modern society, which, as I said, are primarily the ones that are very burdensome for this state at the moment, diabetes and obesity, requires a lot of input. It requires a sustained investment in that research at a basic level, but then also to move it through to a clinical level. Pennington has looked at almost every obesity and diabetes drug that is currently on the market. Some of their testing took place at Pennington. We've had somewhere around 19,000 people participate in clinical trials, so it's a very extensive proposition.
Well, we hope you're fabulously successful at that at Pennington. But you know, you wear another hat, Dr. Winwood.
Yeah.
You're the incoming president of the Association of University Technology Managers. Yeah. Most people don't know what that is, but they actually play a really important role nationwide in this. Can you just give us a couple of highlights about what they measure and what they do?
Well, thanks for that plug. It's actually an international organization, as it turns out. It is as you said, the Association of University Technology Managers. It is about 3,200 members around the world. Around about 75% or 80% of them are in the U.S., but we do have very significant participation elsewhere. And it really is the go-to society for professional development, for advocacy, and for metrics to measure what it is we do. So one of the things that we do in the association is to ask our members to report on their activities. And the kind of things that are easy to report. How many licenses have we signed? How many patents have we crafted? How many startup companies have been formed? And somewhere in that list is certainly a reference to how many dollars we've collected in licensing revenues. But really, it's what kind of an impact can we have? That's our major theme. I think it's reasonable to say that we want, as a professional society, to be able to tell what it is we do that helps take basic research dollars and then translate them into something that's usable and useful for the public good.
And that's the challenge, not just to count licenses, but to be able to see how can we measure the real impact on an economy. Well, let's talk about the Louisiana economy. We have Don Begnaud here, who's the chief executive of Begnaud Manufacturing in Lafayette. And I think you have a particular question for all these gentlemen.
Sure. Well, I'll preface with we just recently completed roughly a 6-year major project with an applied research center, a university outside of Louisiana, and that has come to a close right now. And anyhow, I'm just trying to learn more of who are really the best connectors, so to speak, to be able to be connecting the businesses with the universities to work on some real funded projects.
It's a really key question, making those connections. Gentlemen, who wants to go first?
Oftentimes it starts with the connecting with the researcher, the one-to-one interaction with one researcher to another. And the company may seek out a person for their expertise or knowledge in a particular area, and they may connect at scientific conferences or meetings, and might read about that person's research in the journal articles, and that's generally how a lot of these interactions start, is through interactions with one researcher to another.
And there's, as they say, there's many roads to Rome.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
yes.
Oftentimes people talk about having a funnel where it goes that way. I think that's a difficult nut to swallow in higher education, because there's so many people in such a complex organization. Whether you go through the Office of Intellectual Property, you go through the College of Engineering Dean's office, or as you know, you go through the department chair's office, all of us are pretty well set up to know who to direct you to. And so as long as you make contact,
and
we can get you through there.
Yeah. That LSU and UL so far.
Yeah, and you've experienced that.
Well, Mr. Messer, could Mr. Begnaud come to your
Well,
department and get any help? Or?
Well, certainly. I mean, and Don, I should plug for Don. I mean,
Yeah.
a guy who takes time out of his schedule. He serves on our Small Business Advisory Council. So, one, you could come to LED. But again, we have 8 economic development partners statewide. We have one Acadiana in the Lafayette area. That's another place. But I think it speaks to something that I think Byron and others have alluded to. He's running a business. He's got to make payroll. He's got to make deadlines. We have to continue to figure out ways to sort of address that particular need. Now that I know about it, I can sort of take that off his plate a little bit and try to make some contacts for him. It's that type of being able to intentionally have conversations that bubble up that type of need. The one last plug I will say is, we within LED have a group called our Business Expansion and Retention Group, our BIRG group. And they go out and talk to companies maybe slightly bigger than Don's company about some of their research needs. So that is a part of feedback that we're getting from companies statewide that we try to then share with our higher ed partners.
And you know, Dwayne, we have a student here you're from Iberville, are you not?
Yes, sir.
Okay, tell us a little bit about yourself. I think this gentleman may be someone y'all want to recruit. but tell me a little bit about your perspective on that.
Well, hello. My name is Dwayne Bell, and I attend the Iberville Math, Science, and Arts Academy. And I have aspirations of becoming a politician and going into public service. And I was just wondering, with politics today, what role is furthering innovation playing, or politics playing in that, and what can a young aspiring politician like myself do to continue this work? And I just have to look.
So does politics get in the way, or does it help, or does it do both? Dr. Winwood?
That's a great question.
You've been around?
Yeah, so one of the other hats that I've been wearing for the association Robert mentioned earlier is in the advocacy portfolio. And so we are very active in making sure that this is usually at the Washington, D.C. level rather than local, although it does play in both directions, in both areas, making sure that the innovation ecosystem is secure. So we're very interested in maintaining secure and stable funding for basic research, because that's a seed corn. Otherwise, we don't have any technology to transfer. But also that the patent system is maintained intact and robust. And there are some significant challenges to that right now going on in Congress. So all of the higher education associations have been working very diligently over the last couple of years to make sure that the patent system remains available and accessible to small companies, to small inventor groups, to universities, and is not exclusively the domain of very well-funded and wealthy corporations. That's not the way it was intended. It's supposed to be there for everyone, and that's what we've really worked on recently.
Let's keep this going, Michael.
Yeah, I have a segue into that, and it's probably addressed to Dr. Cardell and Dr. Kubek. What are the significant changes in technology transfer that's been made at our universities to be a catalyst for innovation, and then the commercialization of the research itself?
Yeah, we've tried to institute numerous programs to support the numerous pathways to commercialization. So we do the traditional technology out-licensing. We're trying to move university discoveries from the lab to the marketplace through traditional licensing. But we also develop programs to help entrepreneurs, those people that have aspirations to start new ventures, provide educational courses and things that they can take to become better business leaders. A lot of our stuff had their impetus from an early state grant that we received in 2002. This was something that helped us create a Center for Entrepreneurship. And that was the catalyst for the development of a lot of our programs. Out of that, we grew a proof of concept center. Oftentimes for a company to adopt a new technology, they really want it vetted. It's difficult for them to take on a new technology because there's some risk involved. And so we developed a proof of concept center. This was something we were able to leverage from our initial center grant. We actually won a second grant from the federal government to support this proof of concept center. And what that does is allow companies to do field trial testing of our technologies. So, they are able to actually test this in the field to see if it meets certain market specifications, regulatory requirements, and it actually helps reduce the risk for them and actually increases the value of the technology to them. So a lot of that was stimulated from public investment. It was significant in terms of its impact. It wasn't that significant in terms of the amount.
I should mention that in the PAR report, Louisiana Tech was really making the most out of the money it had, leveraging its money to and support for the best R&D results in the state, actually. So y'all really stood out in our report. I'm going to go to Nikki and then Byron and Denton. You're right after that. Nikki, go ahead.
I'm going to take it a couple of steps back to the very beginning, because before you have technology, you have to have the idea. And so there's an old Chinese proverb that says, the person who says something impossible should not interrupt the person who is doing it. Now, I find that academia usually doesn't know what to do with people in their ranks that are trying to do something new, something different, or something that's thought to be impossible. What are you in academia personally doing, either at LSU or across Louisiana, to change this ideology and to promote innovation among your colleagues, your faculty, and your students?
Mr. Kubek, I'm going to let you take that.
If I take this, I can also answer Mike's question at the same time.
Great. Okay, good.
So it's partly answering your question, Mike. At the end of the day, it's about the people. If you look at people talk about an ecosystem. Another way to look at it is like a solar system, right? And all of this support mechanism still centers around something. And you hit the nail on the head. It's the idea, it's the creativity, it's what's generating all the other needs that we have. So, for example, at LSU right now, we're in the middle of hiring a number of faculty for the College of Engineering. We've had a lot of growth with regard to the number of students. Mike talked about workforce. We're here to meet that need, but we have to hire faculty. So I personally met with all of the people that came and interviewed. There were probably about 50 people that I ended up meeting with, and every one of them, that was a question. Tell me about what you believe about tech transfer. And what's interesting to me is they are already there. The faculty that now are coming through the ranks, they're there. So now the matter will be that we just provide them the right support. And you mentioned some of the things we're doing. LSU, obviously, it's the LIFT grants. It's the fact that we hired an outstanding person to drive intellectual property, Andy Moss, who's in our audience today. So that's part one, and then the other part is providing that system to support them. And you're seeing that happening right now in Louisiana in real time.
Yeah. If I may, there are two things that are sort of related, because I think Dwayne's question is a very important one. I mean, it takes sustained investment in good times and bad times in order to animate and make sure that you've got the seedbed in order to do some of the things that we've been talking about here. I mean, at the end of the day, we understand that these are tough budget situations, but if you talk about political leadership, it's making those tough decisions that are not necessarily in 4 or 8 year windows, but you're talking about change that happens over a 10 to 12 year period. So that's one thing. Rich is too humble to say it, but one of the exciting things that's happened is...
We have two Riches here.
Well, my friend from Tech
okay.
is too humble to say it, but he has been part of a leadership of making sure that the tech transfer officers across the state are now meeting on a quarterly basis.
Yeah.
And that type of knowledge transfer internally within the state of Louisiana is critically important. Also, another plug for tech, part of what Rich talked about really, and the dean here mentioned it, it happens to be what they've created a chief innovation office at Tech, which allows them to be very intentional about bringing together entrepreneurship, creativity, tech transfer, basic research And it really gives a sustained focus at a executive level. And I think that you're going to see that replicated probably in other campuses. And that has accrued to great benefit.
Byron?
I think, so playing off of Quentin's answer, one of the things the PAR report talked about was being very intentional and strategic about applying resources to niches that we're good at here now. And then by applying those resources and focusing those resources, becoming world-class at those specific things. So my question to the panel is, do you agree with that perspective? And if so, what are some of the things that you think as a state, as a region, as an institution, we should focus on that we are either already world-class in and we need to stretch our competitive advantage, or that we can become world-class in?
Well, Mr. Messer, that sounded like one you could just give us the icing on that one. And
yeah, let me sort of lay the foundation. One thing that happened a number of years ago, and many of you, some of you in the audience were part of it, is that LED, Louisiana Economic Development, really worked to look at the emerging growth sectors. The thought was, how do you identify sectors of the knowledge economy where you could take advantage of Louisiana's strengths? And we identified 6 of them: software and digital media, especially healthcare, advanced manufacturing, water management, aerospace and specialized manufacturing in that sector, as well as clean technology and energy. That doesn't mean that we're not focused on agribusiness or other things. We were trying to think about what are the sectors in which the jobs of tomorrow, the industries of tomorrow are going to be. And they play to Louisiana's traditional strengths or our correlative strengths. So I think we sucked that up, but not only at LED, but we began to convey that to our partners in higher ed. So we have the Louisiana Innovation Council. We've created a Battelle study that has been shared publicly, and now the Board of Regents has also formulated itself and organized around a similar set of emerging growth sectors as well as technology and transfer. So I think we're pretty well aligned to sort of move forward on niches that Louisiana can be great in.
Dr. Kubek?
Sure. I was just going to add, when you talk about, in the PARS report, it talked about picking different areas of excellence across different universities. I think given the size of Louisiana that we have to work all together on those focus areas. So when we talk about manufacturing, there's something called the National Center of Advanced Manufacturing and Michoud Assembly Facility, sponsored by NASA. All the engineering needs are involved in that. When I look at the big proposals that come out of Louisiana for National Science Foundation, for example, it usually includes almost every university. So given the size of our state and the number of faculty that we have compared to some other larger states, it really has to be a cohesive network across all of the institutions to have that impact.
Well, that's quite a challenge, not only to you, but to the regents as well, and to the Economic Development Department.
No, but to the regents' credit, though, they are creating, in fact, they're going to create, they have a job description out for a technology transfer liaison. That they're going to intentionally, because of the work that, of the Battelle and some work with Louisiana Innovation Council, and Michael Olivier was a big part of that, is they're now going to create a full-time role for someone to really focus and help the various universities come together in a very intentional way.
We talked about funding, and of course, there's $23 million at least every year that comes out through what we call the support fund. It's not general fund money, it's dedicated money from some mineral revenue that we've had churning out every year. And we ran into some concerns that maybe that was being spread too thin, that maybe we could capitalize more, leverage more that money in the support fund, and that's really up to the regents to help decide that. Gentlemen, agree, disagree?
This is maybe closer to you, Rich.
Oh, you're getting uncomfortable, so now we know we're getting a good question.
I heard on an earlier segment there was a comment about talent and personnel, and I think that's an important thing to factor in also. I'm involved in a study right now where we're looking at, we hear about serial entrepreneurs and serial inventors. Are there a lot of anecdotes? Are there these Thomas Edison types that create a lot of the overabundance of inventions and stuff like that? And we've looked at 5 major institutions: Stanford, MIT, University of Wisconsin, Madison, University of Florida, and can't think of the 5th one. But we looked at all the inventions they created over the last 23 years. And what we found is that over 50% of them are created by 10% of their faculty. So it's not that the other 90% are underperforming or anything, it's just they're doing it at a normal level. It's that 10 to 15% are doing it at an outpaced productivity level. And there's a competition. I mean, all the states are trying to recruit these people away. I mean, we're all in a competition. And, during these tough times, we may lose some of these people. And it takes a long time to try to recover from
or
that.
We may not recruit, or they may not feel confident that Louisiana is the right place to come. I want to ask Andy Begnaud a question. Andy here with Don Begnaud, and you also are with Begnaud Manufacturing. Right? What's your role?
I'm the CAO.
Okay, and I would like to sort of pitch a question at you and then the rest of the panel, which is basically, why aren't more businesses doing more R&D? I mean, what is it about businesses, and what's their role in all of this? And then have you try to answer that with other business people and reflect that back on the panel.
For a business our size, it's really resources. Do you have the manpower? Do you have the correct manpower? And then the dollars and the equipment. If you don't have the equipment, where do you go get it? And it really just comes down to the resources and also the time. And does it really fit the need of the company? So as much as we would love to be doing that type of R&D, it's a step at a time. It's something that we can't handle by ourselves at the moment. Eventually we will get there. So we do work with other organizations. Like Don said, we did do a huge project, a 6-year project with another university outside Louisiana. Now they came to us because we had a specific piece of equipment and knowledge on how to use that piece of equipment in laser welding. That's why they came to us. Not many people that have this technology use it for what we do, which is job shop manufacturing. They buy it for their own product and they don't job it out to anybody else. So that put us in a very unique position in order to get that job.
Well, there are a lot of large companies with a presence in Louisiana. I mean, do you gentlemen see their role as maybe not doing enough research and development compared to other states where big companies have a big presence?
You know, they're so concerned with the short term and actually product development that I don't think they can do the basic research. And I think there's more of a greater reliance is on the basic fundamental research to occur at universities.
Yeah, but I think also many of the large corporations, multinationals present in the state don't have the research and development operations here, their manufacturing, their distribution or whatever. That's not where that happens, and that is a challenge for us, I think, to attract them beyond what they do here. You know, so your point earlier, Andy, was great. I have experience in another state of working statewide to create an asset map. So what all your universities have. And maybe if you look on this as a pyramid, well, maybe the top of that is patents and things that you can license. But as that broadens out, it would include infrastructure. So what kind of equipment that you're never going to buy because it doesn't make sense, you want to use it once. How can we make that available to you on a routine and easy, straightforward basis? So to develop that map of assets across the state.
Yeah, this interaction with business, we need to keep following up with Dr. Kubek and then you, Mr. Messer.
Sure, just real quick. Actually, we like it. We prefer them to do research with us.
Yeah. Right.
So it's good for us. We had 39 companies doing research with the College of Engineering last year. I think the trick for us is to figure out how to be symbiotic. Obviously, a lot of research R&D that used to happen in industry now is moving to academia. And it's an opportunity for, I think, Louisiana. If we can figure that one out, that can actually jump us ahead with regard to the innovation, the innovation competition.
Mr. Messer, same point.
Now, I have to say, we don't have the R&D yet. So I would not be able to go back to the office if I didn't put that yet in there. And we're really working on that. And I think that's a great part of what Adam Knapp and other of our allies, whether it's Michael Heck and Geno Inc. or North Louisiana Economic Partnership and Shreveport and elsewhere, are working on. But another thing that's important to say is, I think that was in the preview with ULL, Louisiana universities do very well as a percentage of industry research. But as everyone noted, a lot of companies are scaling back. But we are actually outperforming other states in capturing that research.
Adam, on behalf of businesses.
So what I wanted to say on the question is probably the one that I've been most interested in for a long time. And in the world of research and development, it falls in three categories. You see academic research, federal research, NIH research. You see private sector research. It's kind of the other big bulk of that. And Louisiana has actually lagged and actually gotten a little bit worse for the last 30 years at the share of private sector research happening here that used to happen here. And so the state put in place about a decade ago a research and development tax incentive to try to motivate more private sector R&D to happen here. So for those watching or those in the audience that want to know about this, it's one of the most aggressive in the state, or in the country I should say, at trying to motivate private sector companies to do research. And it's actually the most beneficial for smaller and medium-sized firms to engage in that. And they can partner with universities for that research, or they can do it in-house. And there's a lot of companies in the Baton Rouge area, as well as statewide, that rely on this. And one of the things that I think the universities have done really incredibly well is to try to connect companies to those benefits, but also to connect them with researchers that can advance their technology development, and that's happening more and more. I think,
and that's the research and development tax credit. Is that what you're talking about?
It's jeopardized this session.
It is going to be under constant scrutiny, like all tax credits are. So, what's our return on investment on that research and development tax credit?
What we've seen in the Baton Rouge area is a lot of early stage companies, either in incubators or private firms that are unaffiliated, finding out about it and using it as a way to leverage their own internal research in their companies, or to start entirely new ventures to advance research that help them. I think many other examples that could be given around the room. But during this legislative session, we've heard more companies coming out who are using it and relying it to develop new innovations and new products for their companies. And that's really going to lead to long-term job creation for the foreseeable future. We had one in Baton Rouge that's grown to over 50 jobs. They had 10 employees 2 years ago.
Well, this is very significant. Andy Moss with LSU.
So I think we need to look at the perspective of the whole picture here, and that is that something that runs for 5 years, when we're talking about technology-based economic development, 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, 30 years, sometimes isn't enough time horizon. So this continued investment that Quentin Messer referred to needs to be consistent. And if you look at what I would hope that we can do around the universities in the state, and that is license technologies to the big companies, that's great. That's always going to happen. But if we can help license technologies to the small companies so that they have a strong foothold in the location, so as they build, they're hiring our graduates, they're employing high-paying, high technology jobs, and over the 10, 15, 20-year time horizon, that's going to return on investment that is hard to quantify.
Dr. Winwood wants to follow up.
I couldn't agree more, Andy. There's, as you know and Rich knows, there's a very steady number in the Association of University Technology Managers statistics, which says that if you get a startup company that's created out of a university technology, then it stays where it is. So if it's invented in Baton Rouge or in Ruston, then about 3/4 of those companies are very sticky. Well, and there's a reason for that. They want to be close to the investigators. So
having helped build a startup.
Yeah, you've done it.
I mean,
right.
I wouldn't have taken my startup anywhere else. Yep. Because I had the connections in that location.
It's a tough situation because we can't wait for Dwayne and our audience to become governor for all this to happen, because he gets it, right? Okay, Denton, a student at LSU, is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I'll be going to my junior year next year.
All right, here's your chance. You've got some of the finest minds in the field right in front of you to talk about this subject.
I was just wondering, what type of consequences might happen on research and development if those programs aren't sufficiently funded with what's going on today in this state.
Let me actually,
Mr. Messer.
Yeah, let me take a. I think you have to try to find the positive in things. So let me position it this way. One of the things that's happened recently is we've gotten to be very creative, and I think one of the things is there were a lot of partnerships between higher education and companies, and LED's been a part of that. And let me just talk a little bit and brag on the LSU partnership with IBM.
You could talk a little bit for about 15 more seconds.
Yes, that partnership is considered among the best. And this is not us. This is IBM says it's among the best. So I think the consequence is going to be you're going to see much more triangulation, higher ed, industry, and regional economic development partners to try to address that.
Okay, we're running out of time. I just want to go down the line. Last thoughts that you want to leave with our audience. We'll go right down the line. Just really quick capsulation. Last thought you want to leave with our audience, starting with Dr. Cordall.
Well, we talked about these faculty spin-out companies and how good they are. The good news about them also is that they seem to survive longer, attract more investment capital, and are more successful. So that is something we want to encourage.
Mr. Messer with LED.
I think that we have our challenges, but we have to more aggressively tell the positives, because I think we own our narrative, and I think that's what we need to do. And I think this show is the beginning of that.
All right. Dr. Kubek.
Because of the collaboration, the hard effort of many people in this room, I think innovation is really on an upward trajectory in Louisiana. Exciting time for us.
Oh, you're doing some extraordinary work at the Department of Engineering, LSU, which is expanding by leaps and bounds. How many people are you still wanting to hire over there?
50.
50?
Maybe 50
okay,
more.
50 more. Okay. All right. Dr. Winwood.
So I think what everyone has really said is this is a continuum. It requires constant priming of the pump, basic research to run through for Rich and myself to find opportunities to move out into the private sector. So it's really a continuum, and you have to keep that going. It's a long-term investment. It needs to be stable in good times and bad.
And do you see Louisiana's numbers eventually getting better in terms of these measures on a nationwide basis?
I mean, I hope so. I think the needle started to move a little bit in the last couple of years, so I think we're onto a track here that's probably something that's positive.
Okay, vote for Dwayne, and we'll get us there. Well, we've run out of time for our question and answer segment. We'd like to thank our panelists, Dr. Cordall, Mr. Messer, and Drs. Kubek and Winwood for their insights in this month's topic. When we come back, we'll have a few closing comments.
Well, Robert, I thought the conversation was very interesting. And, you know, when I see the PhD dissertation topics, many times I don't understand what they're about. And so I think one of the interesting things tonight is I understood virtually everything everyone was discussing about technology transfer.
Right, a very high level, but very understandable. They did a great job.
And I think communicating with everyone in the state what's going on in different parts of the state is awfully important.
And I feel a little more optimistic than I did before the show started, so
well,
that's a good thing.
Optimism is always good. Well, that's all the time we have for this edition of Louisiana Public Square. We encourage you to visit our website at lpb.org/public square. While you're there, take this month's survey, view additional sound bites, and comment on tonight's show. We would love to hear from you.
Well, 2 recent deaths of black males at the hands of law enforcement have sparked national protests. In January, following similar incidents in Ferguson, Missouri, and Staten Island, Louisiana Public Square explored who is policing the police. Well, join us next month for an encore presentation of the still timely Louisiana After Ferguson. Well, thanks for watching tonight, and good night.
Good night, everyone.
For a copy of this program, call 1-800-973-7246 or go online to www.lpb.org.
Support for this program is provided by the Foundation for Excellence in Louisiana Public Broadcasting and from viewers like you.